Crimson Desert has gotten a slew of updates since it released earlier this year, and while Pearl Abyss was cooking, me and probably a few of you guys were taking a break from this absolutely massive game. Until today. How's it going, by the way? Mr. Holton here, and instead of reading through, well, 9 pages of this and have all our eyes glaze over, I decided to just dive into the game and get a feel for all the changes and the new additions to Crimson Desert. And let me tell you, it's like night and day. So first of all, Axiom Force is now available for both Damiane and Oongka, and that means that they have access to basically every other skill that Cliff has access to, like Nature Snare. You can use the slingshot, or whatever it's called, to shoot yourself up into the sky finally, just like Cliff can, but you can use that for both Damiane and Oongka. You can use basically every other skill that Cliff has access to, so if you just want to explore the world and not be interrupted, you know, doing some puzzle or something like that and having to switch over to Cliff, now you can do so by just playing either of your favorite secondary characters, let's say, and Damiane is that for me. Speaking of Damiane and Oongka, they also have brand new abilities and skills. For example, Damiane, she has a new kit of just really awesome and cool animations and kicks and other punches. So they've really updated her movesets here, and I gotta say, you know, trying out these new attacks that she has, it's just, damn, they feel so satisfying, and I just love her kick-based sort of gameplay.
You could have run away. Time with your only remains. You won't get away.
I haven't tried Oongka yet, but he does have some pretty big additions to his skill tree as well, so I'm looking forward to trying that out as well. Anyway, let's move on to some exploration and traversal stuff here. So for anybody who felt like it was pretty annoying having to switch over to Cliff to, you know, use the drill, you can now actually use that for both Damiane and Oongka as well. So, you know, if you want to keep exploring, like I mentioned before, and just, you know, instead of using the pick, you can now use the drill for both of those characters. So very nice change. I appreciate that a lot. And then we have a new addition for your special mounts. So you now have a separate UI for your legendary mounts and special mounts. Like you can see here with my white bear and my wolf, where they have their dedicated menu here. Speaking of legendary and special mounts, you can now also use them with Damiane and Oongka too, and not just Cliff. Very nice. This was something that annoyed me greatly back before, you know, this was possible, so it's very nice of Pearl Abyss to have added that. And a pretty recent addition is the Sotdae, I think it's called. It's like a bird stand, which you can place around the world. And when you've done that, you can then add a bunch of insects and, you know, bird food to it. And after a bird lands and eats, I think it's about 4 or 5, yeah, it's 4 of the feed that you give to them, they become tameable. And you can use that to essentially tame a ton of birds. I don't know how many birds there are, but there are almost too many, honestly. Or well, I'm gonna retract that. You can never have too many birds, okay? Because I know some of you are gonna be like, hey, what did he just say? Anyway, I got a pigeon here, very nice. I think that's a pigeon, very cute, very cool. I like it, and it's gonna work the same way like your dog or your cat, where it helps you pick up loot and stuff. So hey, very nice addition. Then we have a lumberjack buff, I like to call it. So instead of trees going down in 3 hits, you now have them going down in 2. And so, you know, this was a pretty early change as well, so it's not exactly new, but I thought I should mention it anyway. Also, Damiane has a focus strike now that can break barriers to hidden spots just like Cliff can, and Oongka has that as well. So you can now, again, you can do this same exact exploration stuff that Cliff can do as either of the characters. Now, one of the earlier additions or changes they did was that they decreased the amount of stamina that was drained whenever you're gliding and flying around. Now, I really appreciate this, but I still wish it was a little bit less draining still, because, you know, flying around is just so much fun, and I just love it. But for what it is, I do appreciate the fact that they have changed that. So if you haven't played since launch, you will definitely notice that. Also, you can now feed your mounts right from your inventory UI. That said, you cannot feed certain mounts, it would seem. I tried to feed my wolf here, but he wouldn't accept the food for some reason, so I'm guessing this only works for horses and such. For now, at least. Another pretty early change they did, which was very appreciated by the community, was that if you're stealing something and you're not seen, your wanted level will not go up. So, you can just, again, steal to your heart's content as long as you stay hidden. Now, moving on to some housing here, because Perlibis have been doing some pretty crazy stuff with the housing system. So first of all, we have a fridge. Yes, we have a literal fridge called the Kuku Cooler. And you can place every ingredient and every foodstuff in this fridge, essentially, in the Kuku Cooler, and it will not spoil, which is very nice. Then, as well, if you worry about the fact that you're placing your ingredients in the cooler, well, you can still cook from no matter where you are, even if if you've placed all the ingredients in the cooler, you can still cook wherever you are on the map. So you don't need to worry about, you need to have all the ingredients in your bag. You don't need to do that. You just need to put them in the cooler and you can use them from there. Very nice. Also, we have a wardrobe now, so you can essentially just store all your outfits that you're not using, or helmets and, various other clothing that you just want to store and not have in your private storage. And speaking of private storage, this was also a pretty early addition to the game, where Perlibis added a big-ass box that you can find in your tent right now. They first had it behind one of your Greymane members, but it was such a bad placement, so they moved it to the main cliff tent, so to speak. And the more you upgrade your camp, the more you can store. I think there's 5 or 6 different levels to it. And when you're maxed out, you can have up to 1,000 items in the private storage. So that was definitely a necessity for this game. Then we have what I like to call lost gear insurance, because if you have missed out on any items or you have sold any items that you didn't want to sell, like a legendary weapon or whatever, some vendors can resell you these items, and you can buy a bunch of items that you might have missed out on or such. But I think it's only up to 7 days. So you got to make sure that you don't miss that timing. But at any rate, that's very appreciated. So yeah, you can find stuff or items that you've lost at various vendors now and buy them back. Just keep in mind that it's going to be more expensive to buy them back. So that there's some form of sacrifice, for missing out. So yeah, there is that. Speaking of vendors, you can now buy way more armor and outfits around the world. And from my testing, it seems like various vendors have, of course, like unique armors and outfits that I didn't see before. So that's also very cool, very nice. And also there's a new blacksmith mechanic here. So you can extract your gear, which means that you can essentially revert an upgraded gear piece back to one of the earlier stages. And by doing so, you get refunded the materials. So if you've upgraded, say, an item that you don't really want to use anymore, you can get those ingredients back again and use them to upgrade something else. So that is also really cool. That was, I feel, definitely also one of those things that as you keep playing, you find better and cooler stuff and, just better drip overall that just looks cooler. So you want to use that instead. Well, now you can just, refund the material and just, keep upgrading the thing you actually want. Now for some quality of life and other stuff. So if you haven't played Crimson Desert for quite some time, you are going to notice that you will be receiving some retroactive loot for, past challenges and, for map completion and things like that. So in case you haven't been in the game, well, you can prepare to get bombarded with stuff that you get awarded for just having played the game before. Also, there are now a bunch of toggles you can find in the options. There's a ton of options they've added to the game, actually. The ones here are weapons and head toggles, so you can toggle off your ranged weapons so that they don't appear, that is, and you can toggle off your melee weapon so that it only shows whenever you're using it. And yeah, so you can set that to different settings. And speaking of settings, there's also Re-blockade. And if you don't know what Re-blockade is that whenever you have cleared a bandit camp or cleared a castle and whatnot, Re-blockade essentially just has the game refresh that to a state where you have bandits and enemies show up at that castle again, so you can clear it out again, because a lot of people felt that, you know, after having played the game for hundreds of hours, you might be running out of enemies to kill. And that was becoming an issue for me as well, because I had basically cleared almost everything in the explored maps that I had been to. So I was like, oh man, I kind of want some friction here. I want to fight some. And so they added this system relatively recently to where you can now essentially put a setting on where you can have re-blockades not occurring if you don't want that. If you just want to clear the map and have it be completely cleared of enemies, you can have that. Then you can set it to a, something in between. So you still have re-blockades happening every now and then you have a war setting essentially where the game re-blockades these places over and over and over again. So you can just keep fighting as much as you want to. So you can put it in different modes, which is really cool. Speaking of modes, you can also select easy, normal, and hard modes now. So for anyone who felt like the game was either too easy or too hard, you can now select a mode where, it's just easier for you, or very, very difficult, and you'll probably get killed much more. But maybe you have more fun just, getting ganked by enemies over and over. Also, I almost forgot to mention that there is now a feature where you can battle bosses over and over by just revisiting the places that they were at before. So, if you want to fight an enemy that you really liked, or if you just want to challenge yourself against a boss by, turning on the hard mode and just trying that out, you can do that too. So, yes, you don't have to feel like you're stuck to just having cleared the game and then having to start it up or restarting it. You can now actually fight a boss freely if you want to. Also, another setting that I really appreciated myself is that there's now a toggle essentially for sprinting, where you can select either classic or default movement setting is what it's called. And that just means that if you put it on classic, you have to tap your button to keep sprinting. But if you put it on default, you can just hold your run button or your sprint button and you'll just, sprint. So, if you want to spare your thumb while you're playing on controller, you can put that on default. Another setting is that you can now 4 times fast forward for cutscenes if you want to skip those, which is pretty crazy. But again, like some of the cutscenes you might not be a big fan of and just want to get back to the game, you can now set that to 4 times. That's going to be pretty crazy just to fast forward really quickly. Now, you're also going to notice that when you put up the map, you're going to see that the map markers are significantly easier to spot and quests are much easier to track. So that is also a big quality of life update they've done here. Also, another one that was pretty early on was the faster loading. So whenever you're teleporting around the world, it has been cut down a ton. So you basically barely notice the game loading whenever you're teleporting and moving around the world, because they've really optimized how the game loads somehow. I think it's to do with SSD optimization, I'm not sure, or hard drive optimization, but it doesn't matter. It just, it loads much quicker now. Also, another really cool thing is that they've added custom inventory grouping tab. So yes, you can now essentially just group every type of item into various groups. So it makes your backpack much less cluttered. This was also one of those big things that I really feel like the game desperately needed early on, but we finally have it. It definitely makes it easier to find stuff in your bags when you can just sort them like this. And then there are a few other things here that I noticed when I was playing, is that picking stuff up from the ground is just less clunky and it's easier to be very specific on what you want to pick up. And you can loot things from further away, so you don't need to stand on top of things anymore. Now, as you may have noticed here, this was definitely not all the changes that they've introduced and all the additions, but it's literally, what, 9 or 10 big patches now. So yeah, I'm not going to sit here and read those for you for hours, but these are the ones that I noticed. And if you're like me, you're probably going to notice a lot of these too that I mentioned. I think these are probably the biggest ones, the most noticeable ones. Overall, though, I feel like the game is much smoother. I feel like the controls are less annoying. I just feel like the game feels much better right now than it ever did. Like they've really been cooking over at Pearl Abyss, and I gotta say, it has steadily impressed me with the frequency of updates they've been releasing. And so yeah, I can't wait to see what they've got planned for the future. I was reading an article the other day where they talked about possibly, you know, not fixing the story maybe, but, you know, updating some of the language and making it more easy to understand and things like that. So they're working, they're cooking over at Pearl Abyss, man. Anyway, let me know if there are other changes and additions that I missed out mentioning here, so people in the comment section can read up on that and see if there's any other big ones that they should know about. But thank you for watching as always, and if you're a fan of Crimson Desert, then feel free to subscribe, because I will be covering more of this game whenever we get any bigger updates. This has been Mr. Holton, signing off.